Not going to be alone on the pod today. Rian Winter of Sports Chat 503. Check out his YouTube channel, talking all things Ducks today. Oregon football, recruits, basketball's disappointing, and coming up today on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster, lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening to the show or the channel if you are watching on YouTube. Nice comments. I see those. I appreciate those. And I appreciate all of you for keeping up with the show. 5-star reviews on the podcasting platform of your choice, particularly Apple Podcasts, always helps with the show. What else helps with the show? Having people on who are not me. You Duck fans get to listen to me aplenty, so I like to bring on some other voices, and I've got Rian Winter, Sports Chat 503, and you can see on YouTube, everybody, all things Oregon Ducks all the time. Ryan, it may be the off season for football and basketball now, quote unquote. Unfortunately, it's the off season for men's and women's basketball. We will get to that later in the show, but the news, it just keeps on coming, doesn't it?
Sure does, Spence. So glad to have you on. So glad to have me on, man. Appreciate you, bud.
Good to have you back. So I want your thoughts on Nico Iamaleava. I think I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. I hope that I am. A lot of people just go to Nico, but here at Locked On Ducks, we're making the extra effort, Ryan. That's the way we roll. So Nico's coming to Oregon, or so says the crystal ball. Then the NIL, yada, yada, yada. Now he's going to Tennessee. What'd you make of that whole situation and how it played out?
You know, I feel like I'm a little old school when it comes to recruiting, and I like to kind of just wait till they get here, wait till they fully commit. It's hard for me to get onto so much of these hype trains and get excited about one guy and maybe not the other. I really liked him. I went back and looked at his tape. I looked at his interviews. I liked his vibe. But you know, these guys today, they've got a lot of options, and if you're a guy like him, who you know, with his size, his arm, everything else, everybody's going to want you. And obviously, Oregon's in that position, but I'm not that worried about it. I think that, again, to me, it's outrageous to give a high school junior $8 million.
It's a lot.
I mean, the kid hasn't played his senior year of football yet, has yet to even play 1 year of college football. How about these guys that are 2 years in? They've been going to practice for 2 years, in the weight room for 2 years. Where's their bag? So it's funny to me that that's the trend that we're going on. You know, good luck for him. It's all good. You know, get that money. I'm totally fine with it. I don't really think of that as being a threat. You know, Tennessee going to the SEC. You know, you're kind of just you know, a small fish in the rest of the ocean. It feels like over there now. Quarterback play, you know, it has not been necessarily the SEC's greatest forte. You know, as all these years have gone by, you know, they're much more of a offensive lineman, defensive lineman driven league, but running backs, wide receivers. But man, I'm telling you, Tennessee's got a good history there. If he can come in there and do some things, then maybe he's worth that money. But I think it's a little outrageous that they're even floating around those kind of numbers, because what's next? I mean, this is the year one of NIL. We're already talking about an $8 million check to a high school junior. That seems strange.
Yeah, I can't imagine it stays like this forever. That's kind of been my general take on it. Is yes, it's crazy, and there are no rules, there are no regulations on it at all whatsoever, because they made this change. You know, the pressure had been mounting for a long time, and you know, I personally agree with it, especially if it means the return of NCAA football video games. Like, put me on board. Like, if that's one of the hurdles that was missing, then I am definitely in that camp. But it does feel like we will look back in 5 or 6 years and say, boy, remember that time when these offers were able to just be made and there were no, you know, restrictions whatsoever. You know, it's like we live in a capitalist country, but it's not like there are zero regulations on businesses in the economy. But it feels like right now this is just sort of an anarcho-capitalist environment. And if you don't know what that means, it means just no government, just let the market do absolutely everything, no government involvement whatsoever. But Oregon is still in a fine position recruiting wise. I've never thought that Nico was going to be, you know, the the rise or fall of the 2023 recruiting class. Sure, it would have helped it a lot, but there's still a lot of guys that Oregon's looking at. And there's one guy in the class of 2022 I want to ask you about as well, Josh Connerly, the 5-star offensive lineman. But the next quarterback who Duck fans I've noticed are paying a lot of attention to, rightfully so, is Jaden Rashada, who's a 5-star out of the state of California, I believe Pittsburgh area in California, not Pennsylvania, and everyone wants him to come up, and why the heck not? He's got impressive tape as well. And then there's Jaden Wayne, the 5-star defensive end out of the state of Washington. I want you to rank in order, Ryan, the importance of each recruit for the Ducks. Who would you say should be their highest priority, and who would you say is the lowest of the three? Not that any don't matter or wouldn't be great gets,
Right.
but who do you think should be the number one of those three recruits?
Personally, I like to start with the trenches. So I think your offensive lineman is number one. I think your defensive line is number two. And I think your quarterback would be number three. Now, that doesn't mean the quarterback's not an important part of the puzzle, obviously. Quarterback's the most important position on the field. But I also am not necessarily thrilled with trying to leverage or put all your eggs into one basket at such an early age. You got to bring a lot of quarterbacks in and let them see who can play. You need to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 guys possibly in that room, all competing. And I do feel like there's a little bit of a change of the guard here with this class that's going to be that first class that's really getting that early bag early before you even have an NIL deal. You're just getting a check. It just seems weird. So I think the Connerly thing is big this year. I do think that the transition from Mario to well, I don't even know if it's just Adrian Clem exactly, but it's just that new mentality. I don't know if they're going to be going after offensive linemen the same way that they were doing with the Cristobal era. I think Cristobal went after offensive linemen first and foremost. I think that Mirabal went along with it, and I think that Cristobal wanted to get the absolutely biggest guys he could get, even if those guys' body types didn't transition very well or didn't translate to playing time yet. I mean, guys like Feope, guys are just absolutely huge, great individuals, but might not be able to get to the point where their body is actually right for this position. Connerly looks ready to go now. I mean, that guy looks legit as an offensive lineman. And again, defense, I think defense is an interesting one. I don't know what we're going to do with this defense. I think they're going to be built a lot more on speed. I don't think it has to do as much with size on the defensive line. I think a lot of it's going to have to do with scheme and speed. But then, look, obviously their quarterback, Rashada looks great. I mean, his film looks awesome. And his camp film looks great. I would rather look at the camp film than the regular high school film. Not that the regular high school film is not good, but it all looks great. I mean, come on, when you're playing it, when you're a 5-star up against these guys, it always looks good. But the camps, I think, are really what it looks. You get the kind of the nitty gritty there. You get the 7-on-7 stuff. You get to really see their arm talent. And the guy looks the part. But you know what? There again, I don't think Duck fans should be so set on, just because Nico's gone, you got to go over with Jaden now. I think there's going to be a lot of different flexibility going on here. And I also think that this is the class that's going to wait the longest to commit. I think that you see right now, you've got Cole Martin as the only guy on the list. Demetrius Martin's son, he right away, basically as soon as Martin was on the staff, he basically committed. And there's nobody else. And so, I do think the quarterbacks tend to go earlier and establish themselves in the draft, kind of the first ones or some of the first ones in each class. So I do think they're focused on the quarterback, but it would not surprise me at all if this class came in very late and came in pretty hot.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to remember, Duck fans, if you're worried at all about, what if we don't get Rashada and we didn't get Nico, is you also don't know what quarterbacks are going to emerge and kind of rise late in the class or in the recruiting cycle, right? Because the number of stars you get is almost not entirely, but it's partially based on how many offers you have and the caliber of school that is offering you. So if a guy starts to rise as a senior, maybe he was a 3 or low end 4-star as a junior, but then he, undergoes a growth spurt or his play starts to take a massive step up his senior year, he could then elevate to be that sort of quarterback, and Oregon can be in the mix for a guy like that. And you have no idea who it's going to be. I don't have my eye on someone who, this is a 3-star quarterback. I think he'll, one day be a 5-star recruit, or, the next Justin Herbert or Mariota, who are 3-star recruits. They're not necessarily just hanging out there. Maybe they are, but there's still so much time to go. And yes, quarterbacks often do it early in the class because, as Nico's talked about, going to Tennessee, and if I'm a Vols fan, I'd be excited to hear this. He wants to be a recruiter for that class and say, hey, we're building something here. Hey, this is what we're going to do. It's very much a tag team effort. I think Duck fans saw that when we got Jaleel Florence after already having his teammate Jaleel Tucker as well. I want your thoughts on the defensive end position because I think that's a pretty glaring weakness with only 2 edge players listed on the roster right now, and Anthony Jones not yet there. But first, I want to tell you all about Stat Hero. I love March Madness. I love those brackets, but can't remember the last time I went deep or won any money because it's just so unbelievably tough. I'm hedging my bets this year with Stat Hero's NCAA Pick'em contests. Stat Hero's NCAA single game Pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling, a combo as good as peanut butter and jelly. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/lockedon. Use promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% deposit match. That means if you put $100 in your account, they will match it 100%. That's stathero.com/lockedon. Use promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% match. Terms and conditions apply. This episode also brought to you by Built Bar. Had one on the course earlier today. That's why I'm wearing the golf shirt here as Ryan and I record this pod on YouTube. Was wearing it on the course and thought, you know what? Don't need to change the shirt today. Already rocking it with the Ducks, and I was rocking with Built Bar all afternoon. They got me through. I didn't play well, but, that's not because of Built Bar, because Built Bars have got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Candy bars, they're about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs. Just go with Built Bar. They're all about taste, and they're way healthier. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. Get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Mint brownie for the win. Not sure if you've had them before, Ryan, but I'm a huge mint brownie guy in general, and it's no surprise that Thin Mints are also my favorite Girl Scout cookie.
Well, as you can see by my physique, I do like a snack every once in a while. And I love golf, and golf and snacks go hand in hand as well.
Golf and snacks do go hand in hand. Some people are about golf and alcohol. I'm like, no. Golf and snacks is the way to go. Keep yourself going throughout the round. Built Bar, a great way to do that. Speaking of great, or perhaps less thereof, I don't know if that made any sense, but you get what I'm trying to say here.
Sure.
When you look at the defensive end position for this Oregon football roster right now, I see it as probably the biggest glaring weakness on either side of the ball. Now, depending on how you feel about Bo Nix, you might think it's quarterback or the receivers are kind of unproven. You could make a case here or there, but there are only 2 edge players listed on the roster, Ryan. One of them's Brandon Dorlus, who we know plays primarily between the tackles. So Braden Swinson is sort of the Ducks' only defensive end or guy who is going to get after the passer off the edge. He's a 3-star recruit. I thought he kind of played like it last year. He's solid, belongs on the field. He's a contributor, but he's not an anchor sort of a player. Maybe he pops this season. Would certainly be a big help. But when I look at the defense and the roster at large, I say, man, I don't know how Oregon's going to create pressure off the edge.
Yeah, I think, it could be also semantics a little bit. I think there's other guys in that outside linebacker group that it feels like they're going to be on the other side, maybe hand down, maybe on 2 feet or whatever the case may be. But when I think of edge rusher this year, the first guy that I think of is actually DJ Johnson. So I think that you're going to feel a lot of the pressure off the edge, whether it's being listed as linebacker, outside linebacker, whatever the case may be. Defensive end, I like Swinson. I thought Brandon Swinson had a good year. And, the whole situation between Dorlus, between the tackles, I totally agree with. But maybe they slide him out a little bit. I think they added a little bit of beef with their defensive tackles. I feel like they've got some guys coming up that might fill that spot a little bit. And Dorlus is a very good athlete, very light on his feet for how big he is. And he's rangy. And I think he gets a hand up. The thing that, Jordan Scott talked about over and over and over during his time, and I absolutely love Jordan, is about he wanted to put more pressure on the quarterback. He was a great run stopper. Again, as a freshman, the guy was basically a freshman All-American because of his run stopping. But he wanted to get to the quarterback and pressure the quarterback more. He never really was able to. Dorlus came in right out of the gate and had a hand in the quarterback's face on numerous occasions. So it feels like it could be just a different player between the tackles. He was getting pressure. What happens if you slide him out a little bit and let him collapse the end? Now, the outside backers, though, this is where I really start to get into it, because I think DJ Johnson is one of the best football players on the team. I think the guy athletically can play a lot of positions. He's incredibly big, incredibly fast. The guy came in as a good defensive end, outside backer, moved to the tight end spot during the 2020 year. I thought he was the offensive MVP as the tight end. He was absolutely clutch, crucial, had great plays. And then last year was a legitimate two-way player. I mean, how many guys are playing both ways for D1, including in the last minutes of the Ohio State game, gets a huge first down as a tight end and gets like the game-winning sack as a defensive end. I mean, this is a guy who is legitimate. He's also just getting married. The guy's got his whole life put together. The guy's looking for the next level. And I do think he's going to increase his draft stock dramatically this year with just being able to focus on one side of the ball. I think he's going to wreak havoc. And I really like him switching numbers again. He's number 2 this year. The other guy that I'm really excited for is Anthony Jones. He's the freshman. I don't see the freshman. We were talking about this earlier a little bit. I don't necessarily see the freshman playing a lot early on. I don't have huge expectations for the freshman. Anything that they give the team, I think, is great. But he's a guy who body type wise, it feels like he could play on day one. He's got that sort of build. And I don't know exactly how they're going to run this. This is kind of the exciting time of being a Duck fan right now, where you've got some defensive masterminds in the building. It's just, how are they going to utilize these players? And we know that there was some maybe ill utilization last year, or maybe they didn't get the most out of their players last year with the defensive side. And it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. The other guy who I absolutely love is Mace Funa. And Mace is a guy who can put a lot of pressure on a quarterback, can also hold the edge in the run game, does a really good job in space, tackles well, solo tackles well in space. And so I'm a fan. I think you're right. I think out of every, especially coming off of what we had with KT, right? It was like you absolutely, the number one guy on your entire team was at the defensive end spot. You knew exactly what you were getting, which could be a reason why Dorlus did so well, right? I mean, Dorlus definitely, I would tell that all the time to Jordan. Nobody's a bigger fan of Jordan Scott than Troy Dye. Troy Dye was the guy, one of the best linebackers of all time at Oregon, because Jordan was in front of him eating double teams all day. So the idea is, there's a lot of different options here when you're looking at offensive line, defensive line. And I really look at that idea of holding that edge. That was the first thing I really learned as a player when I played defensive end, was how difficult it is to try to really hold that edge, get the contain, don't let anybody off the outside shoulder, but also have that mentality of, when I get the green light and I can go after the quarterback, I got to go 100%. So I'm really looking to see if Dorlus does move all the way out there, if he could be that next guy. But I really think that if you line it up what you thought you're going to line it up with Popo in the middle, with Dorlus on one kind of corner edge a little bit, and then DJ on the other side, I think you're in real good shape.
I think the potential for DJ Johnson is there. I'm so fascinated by the number change, and numbers seem insignificant, but to guys' mental approach and how they feel when they're stepping onto the gridiron, it matters. It's just one of those things in sports that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you've been around sports your whole life, in which case, it makes absolutely perfect sense. I'm glad you brought up that note with KT and Dorlus, because that's kind of what I was thinking, because Dorlus was a player on the defensive line, or I think he would be, a player on the defensive line who we'd see as solid, but now we see him as NFL draft potential. But he has to show he can do it without Thibodeaux, who's eating up the double teams, who's eating up the slide protections, who's just taking all the attention. And so now that he's not there, how does Dorlus pop? Positionally, though, if he were to slide a defensive end, they have the potential to do that because they added Jordan Riley from Nebraska and, more importantly, Sam Taimani from Washington. So if you wanted to, right, do what you're saying is Dorlus maybe slim down a little bit, utilize that speed and quickness, which I agree he totally has. You slide him to defensive end. You have Taimani and Almavai in the middle with Riley backing him up. I think that could I think that could work, and I hadn't thought about that before. That's why we bring you on the show, Ryan, so you
Let's
can
go.
offer some perspectives.
Well, and the other two guys I think they're going to make a difference. Jackson Powers Johnson is now focused 100% on the defensive side,
he
and
flipped.
Jonah Miller slide over there too. So again, guys who are athletic enough to play both sides of the ball are guys I like. So
Yeah.
Jackson Powers Johnson, with basically no practice, jumped in there in the bowl game and looked legitimate. The guy who really played well in high school on the defensive side and could have probably just been a defensive guy the whole time. But obviously, with the crystal ball, with everything else, I think the offensive line was more of the side that he wanted to focus on. But this is a guy who I think can get after it. I think he's got a mean streak. I think he can get after it. And I'm also looking forward to see Jake Shipley, a guy who's kind of dealt with some injury. He's had some time on the field a little bit. Kristen Williams as well. Keyon Ware-Hudson. I think there's guys who are gonna fill up that spot. I think there's a lot of guys in the defensive tackle room, enough to where you can slide Brandon out a little bit, and I do think that's going to benefit him. His footwork was so impressive to me. The guy was absolutely efficient. He's got a big body, but he's light on his feet, and I really like how Dorlus plays. And he's got a big mitt. He gets the hand up in the air quickly. He knocks down balls from the corner. So I'm excited. I agree with you. It's a little light. There's not that many guys there, but if they can hold out with injury, I think they can be very, very creative about how they work that middle.
Yeah, Keyon Ware-Hudson is, I think, the biggest recruit of the names that you listed in there in terms of guys who were kind of waiting on his potential to be fully realized for the Ducks on the defensive line. So maybe he's somebody who pops in that situation. The thing about Dorlus putting him at the defensive end, the only concern that I would have is typically you want your defensive ends to be able to chase down a quarterback outside the pocket or make a play on a tight end catching the ball in the flat, drop him into coverage every now and then. I don't know if Dorlus can do that, but if he thins down, changes his body type a little, I think that it's possible. We just haven't seen it yet, and the room is just so unproven. It's why I wanted them to add Mitchell Agude, the transfer from UCLA. I think he would have slid in and started day one and be a high impact player as he was for the Bruins a season ago, but ultimately he decided to go to Miami. We're going to switch to basketball here with Rian Winter of Sports Chat 503. But first, I'll tell you this episode brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. They ask a bunch of complicated questions. Just save time and money when using Rock Auto. Family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you could ever need. Brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, now even new carpet. They've got it all. Go to rockauto.com. See all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So all that positivity, Ryan, for football, and now we have to put on a smile, full Joker in the Dark Knight style. We gotta paint it into our faces and talk about Oregon basketball. I mean, it's not disaster going off a cliff. I think it's a great place to be as a program writ large when your women's team gets bounced in the first round, upset by 12th seed at Belmont in a game that they had a couple chances to win. Your men's team wins 20 games, and here we are saying that was just a disappointing, horrible, no good, very bad, awful, terrible season. That's not a bad place to be, but it was a disappointing end in a postseason sense for both Oregon basketball programs. What did you see from the Ducks down the stretch, and what was your take on all of it?
Well, let's start with the men. It all fell apart, and I do think that Will's illness down the stretch caused some concern. I was at the UCLA and USC games. I was in the building for both of those. Both games, he was fairly productive, and he was still doing things with assists and still getting their stuff, but it just felt like his body language was a little off, and I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. I don't think anybody really did, obviously, but it can kind of tell, just as a guy who's been around basketball, a guy who's seen enough, coached enough, you can just kind of read body language a little bit. I was really close to the floor, and again, I feel like as soon as we lost that USC game, it was just an absolute heartbreaker. It was like, here we go, it's done. Put a sock in it, it's over. But I was really impressed at how Davion Harmon really stepped up. He was a guy who, at times early in the season, I thought could have been the Ducks' best player. When Will kind of struggled coming out of the gate, Davion was really consistent. And And then obviously Jacob Young, just a scoring machine. When he was able to go, he was on fire. Still, there was a little bit of foul trouble in early some games, got him out of rhythm a little bit. But this is a team that I just feel like they could never really figure out how to work their bigs in. And they had these bigs, and I thought Nate Biddle played really good down the stretch when he got his opportunity. I love Big Frank's energy. Absolutely love Big Frank.
I'm a huge Frank fan.
Huge. And right out of the gate, too. I mean, like, I interact with a bunch of the guys, just through text messages here and there, or whatever. And Frank's a guy who's consistently always there for, some communication. And with my son as well. My son loves him. My son takes pictures. My son was sending pictures of him with dunking and everything, hitting block shots. And I just love his energy. I love his tenacity. Gets in a little foul trouble. He's raw, but it's just, I just feel like they were out of rhythm all year. Dana's offense is not set up for the big man. It's really set up for guards, and it's set up for a 3-guard offense where you basically have at any moment a guard that can go attack mode. And they just didn't really have that. They had the 3 guards. They had talent. They just really couldn't figure out a way to work it. And I just, from my perspective as a coach, I was just dying to see some on-ball screens at some point, run a pick and roll at some point with these guys, because you've got these big men crashing the basket, and Fale's a great player. He started off the season slow coming off the injury, but once he hit his stride, he looked a lot better down the stretch. I just feel like they just gave up on so many buckets. It was really hard for them to get a bucket. They would go 10, 15 seconds into the shot clock and have nothing. And they're just like trying to end up 6-7 seconds, like it's the end of the game, force up a shot. And that's just not necessary. I do think there was a lot of unwarranted criticism on this team. I thought a lot of people jumped on Will Richardson right out of the gate. Oh, he's not doing enough. He was the most consistent player all year. What are we talking about? Yes, he did falter down the stretch, but he was sick. And anybody who knows mono, it's legitimate. Mono, like, literally is a energy zapping illness. Like, you don't have the energy. So I thought he was a warrior for playing as long as he could. That USC game especially was such a heartbreaker. Having his head cut, had the big bloody Band-Aid on it, misses the very last shot that I've got a great video of on my channel. It's right underneath the basket, literally second row there. And he was just so deflated. And then they had the senior night right afterward, and the whole team comes around him to like hug him and everything. It just was felt so bad in the arena right then at that moment. And I was like, I don't know how these guys are going to recoup and rebuild this thing. And I'm glad that they got the win against the Bees, because, again, we're talking about how terrible a 20-win season is. How about up in Corvallis, a 3-win season?
Yeah, they're having a mass exodus too. Everybody's leaving. Jared Lucas is in the portal.
Sure.
Silva's going to the NBA. It's going to be a total reset.
There's no more coaches' kids up there. They got rid of all the Thompson kids and the Tinkles kids. So it's like they were the team for a little while when they had those coaches' kids running with them. But again, I just feel like on the men's side, they'll regroup. Really liked what I saw from the recruiting side. I think they've got a good group coming in. But again, transfer portal, if you don't win early and you don't get playing time early for these freshmen, they can hit the door too. So it's going to be interesting. I love Big Frank, and I think that you can put something together with Big Frank where he is an energy, energizer bunny, whatever you want to call it, energy guy that can really set the tone for a team. And defense is how you're going to win games. Altman's teams need to rebound. They have to rebound to win games. And they just got beat on the boards a lot this year. And that's just something you're not used to seeing with Dana. Now, if you go back in time, though, Dana's system's not perfect. Go back and look at it. Dylan Brooks had to bail you out numerous times. Peyton Pritchard had to bail you out numerous times. Just keep going down the list. Joe Young, whatever the case may be. Eugene, last year got hot. Chris Duarte. All these guys, end of shot clock, hit major shots. This year, they just didn't fall. So, the system is still, I think, is solid. Dana's getting a little older, getting a little more gruff, losing some assistant coaches, which was very rare for him. The assistant coaches really make a big difference, especially in recruiting. So again, he was very, very blunt after those games. He's like, hey, these guys are they tired of me? Let them go to the portal, whatever. You were talking about the Kelly Graves side. You guys, they're going to coach these kids hard. They're going to try to get what they're going to get out of them. They know how to win basketball games. So you have to go with what the coach is doing. But not every player wants to hear it. and you get 7 weeks into the season, it's a little tiring sometimes for these kids. And, again, the transfer portal is always the grass is greener on the other side. Now, the women, I feel like the women's program is actually in a much better position than the men's. They really do a good job of filling up the arena. The vibe is so much better in the arena for the women's game. I have season tickets for men and the women, and the women's games are so much more fun. They're so much more lively. The crowd is totally into it. It's loud. The men's game is crickets, man. It was really a weird year, and it could have been because of COVID. I get it, but it was a very strange year in the building this year for the men. Now, the women have a mass exodus. You basically have one player left off that team now because everybody's gone. You had the 3 transferred in one day. I mean, that's brutal. I was surprised with Kylie Watson. I think, she would be a starter next year. I think she'd be one of the main cogs of the wheel, and had a huge support group, has a great friend group there. A lot of friends on the basketball team. Marcus Harper posted football team. He's friendly with them. And it's just, it's sad to see some of those kids go when I don't really know where they're going. Are they really going to make a difference in their next school? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, so I don't know. I look at the women's program. It's all about Pow at this point because she's the only one left with that squad. India Rogers, you've got some good guard play, but it's going to be really difficult to try to have anybody replace Sabali. Both those Sabali sisters are so talented, but there's not many bigs that can take a rebound off the glass, dribble the thing in transition, beat guards down the floor with speed as a big girl, and then dish the ball with ease, catch the ball in transition, layups, turnaround jumpers. I mean, she's got a lot of game to her. So I'm hoping it'll get better, but it was the Sedona thing that I was the most disappointed with. I feel like when Sedona's rise of her meteoric tension with the weightlifting thing last year and everything else, she's on commercials now. I don't think her game is matched. She's still got the good little 15-foot jumper. She's got some pretty good back to the basket stuff, but I haven't really seen her evolve the way I'd like to see her evolve. And I really would kind of lean on Kelly for that. I think that Kelly should be more connected to their bigs transitioning into better players as they get older. Now, the Sabrina era is over, right? That was a totally different ball game. You're going to have to rebuild it after that. A team that beats the U.S. national team. I mean, come on, right? That's not happening again anytime soon. But this is a team that should be competitive for the Pac-12 going forward. You're probably not going to beat Stanford, but I was there for the Stanford game. I mean, if it wasn't for just a couple of plays
they
here
should
and
have
there,
won. They should have won. They should have won that game.
Should have won. 100%.
I actually disagree with you, Ryan, about that. You're not going to beat Stanford. Stanford is at the peak of their powers right now. They're in the Final Four. Oregon is having a down year by Kelly Graves' terms. They were a 5 seed, and still at Matthew Knight Arena, Oregon should have won that basketball game. So I think that's Arizona is really good as well. I think those are kind of your 3 horses on the women's side of Pac-12 basketball, and I think Oregon should fully expect to be in that conversation going forward because that's the standard that Kelly Graves and company have set and have earned as the coaches for the Ducks.
I agree. It's tough sledding out here. I mean, Oregon State's good. You talked about Arizona being good. UCLA is good. I mean, there's a lot of good schools out here on the women's side in the Pac-12, and it's a gauntlet. And they're going to have their hands full. But I agree with you. I think that they played up to their competition. I was at the UConn game. They beat UConn. Obviously, UConn was down there, big player. But the vibe in that UConn game was absolutely insane. It was such a good energy in that arena. And then you turn it around and you lose to Belmont at the end of the year. I mean, it was like, is this the same team, and had chances to win that one too, obviously. But yeah, I love basketball. As a kid growing up, I was a huge Oregon Duck basketball fan. I used to go to basketball camps every year. Matt Court used to try to go to that thing all the time. And I still have that sort of pride and love for the basketball programs. We've seen some great stuff there. But it feels like the energy in the building for the women is so much better than the men. And I don't know what they're going to do to clean that up for next year. I don't know if these young guys really get the crowd going. There's some high flyers in this group. There's some guys with height in this group. And maybe they can rebuild it with this freshman group coming in.
Well, we certainly hope that they'll be able to. We'll be covering it all the way here on Locked On Ducks. So will Ryan Sports Chat 503 on YouTube and at Sports Chat 503 on Twitter. Ryan, we love having you on the show, and we'll continue to bring you back. Appreciate the time, man.
Oh, always a pleasure, man. Love what you do. Let's go Ducks.
Go Ducks. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Be back in your feeds or on the channel tomorrow. Like and subscribe. And if you want a question answered here on the show, tweet with the hashtag AskLODPod, or you can DM me. You see on YouTube down there at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. DMs wide open. Ask me anything you want. Preferably a question about the Ducks, but if you want to ask me a philosophical, existential, meaning of life question, you know what? I'll do my best to give you an answer, whatever it is. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.